Good morning, Marvin. Thank you for being with us today. And I'm
Thank you for
delighted to
having
be
me,
here
Dean.
with you and I look forward to sharing your wisdom with us to aid us in our evolutionary journey.
Well, thank you for having me. I've been on this journey for many, many, many years. Started out at 18 years old and grew up around Virginia Beach, around the Edgar Casey Foundation, and that really solidified a whole lot of my search. Um, I got an astrology reading when I was 18, and I read the book. Think on These Things by Judah Krishnamurti.
Hmm.
And it helped me to realize that I could think for myself and evaluate all spiritual concepts for myself. And, that kind of started my journey many years ago. And it started off, in accepting the idea of past lives and so forth. And then, like I said, I got into the Edgar Casey Foundation and read a lot of his readings and a lot of his work. Um, Read a lot of books on Edgar Casey. Found my spiritual teacher in the 90s and did a lot of Native American studies for a decade. And then after I left corporate America, I started doing more of my astrology work. And when I advise somebody to get a regression, because uh, they had some influence coming out of the subconscious mind that was causing a lot of their repeated patterns and conflicts. And then I was told, well, I don't know where to get one. And I said, back in the 70s and 80s, with all us hippies doing regression therapy, I said, "Oh heck, I'll do it." So I got a book, and I said, "I wonder what they've learned anything new about regression work." And I read a guy from Denver called in a book called "The New Regression Therapy." So I read that, and it said something about hypnosis, and I said, "Well, that's kind of a novel idea. I've never heard of that." So I studied that. I've got 3 certifications in hypnosis, over 600 hours of conflict resolutions through hypnosis, and of course, led me into neuro linguistic programming, so that I got a thorough understanding of the subconscious mind and the part that plays in in our spiritual journey. And of course, that's kind of led me into where I am today with that soul fusion healing, integrating the mind, body, and soul. And so my journey's been a long one, and that's really allowed me to um, study a lot of enlightened people throughout history
Hmm.
that have had tremendous understanding and enlightenment. And it's not just in today's time that we're doing that search. That search has been going on for 5 to 10,000 years, if not 30,000 years, with starting off with Hermetic principles.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where I am today, and I still work with consulting and working with people that for conflict resolutions, smoking, and anxieties and depressions and stuff like that. And it always, when you get into metaphysics and spirituality, it's all encompassing to help us really understand some of our conflicts and things that we face in our life.
So let's kind of start with the basics for our listeners. And from your research and your experience over the years, how do you explain to someone who we are and what we're doing here?
Well, the first principle is that we're spiritual beings.
Mm-hmm.
And the second principle is we have a body. And the third principle is we live in a linear time frame, so that stretches out our creations so that we can learn and grow and evolve from that learning process, because we're in a linear time frame, and that spreads time and space out, which which in the higher spiritual realms there is no time space. That's kind of made up for the human condition. um, and so when
Well,
we
it
when
defines the nature of our experience to a great degree. We are designed to be able to process only one thought at a time, which requires us to perceive time as being linear and being within a limited framework that allows us to digest the nature of our experiences theoretically.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, out of that, I don't disagree with anything that you have said, but we perceive ourselves to be autonomous beings existing in a physical experience. How do you explain to someone who we are within that context? And I understand mind, body, and spirit, but just taking it contextually as an overview perspective, what is that?
Well, everybody on this planet is for the purpose of self-realization, and that self-realization has been a process of multiple lifetimes. And we've come through those lifetimes with perspective, perceptions, and errors in our thinking, and they need to be corrected. So they're corrected through the experience that we have in this life. And we have to um, understand that we get desires from our soul to establish what we experience, so that we can experience what we need to experience. And sometimes that's a positive, and sometimes it isn't a positive, because we also have to experience uncomfortableness in many cases,
Well, if we
so that we
experienced
can
only what we
change
like, we wouldn't
perception.
know what we like because we have nothing to compare it to.
Well, exactly. And so, I'm akin to the quantum theories that we're all living in simulations, so that we experience um, specific experiences that will help us to understand self-realization and our procreative abilities. And in doing so, then we have to get orders from our soul self, our higher self, and those
Okay.
orders come down from our soul group, which then helps us to experience the experiences that we need,
Mm-hmm. So
instead of the ones.
you perceive our I call it our metaphysical self. A soul for me is too tied to a religious concept that limits our understanding of that. But our metaphysical self, um, do you uh, how do you see the functioning of our metaphysical self, our enduring self, in our participation in creation?
Well, we're never absent of universal consciousness, ever. It's always within us. And so, as we call ourselves co-creator, and the more we can align with that universal consciousness, or align with that metaphysical self, well, then the more we acquiesce to that higher self, and the ego takes a second seat behind that higher self, because the ego isn't even aware of a higher self. And so your conscious mind, which houses your ego structure, which comes from your conditioning and programming in your early life in this lifetime, um, it always it's trying to protect you first and foremost.
To
And
protect
so,
you, did you say?
absolutely protects you.
The
Um,
ego.
so the ego will make you right and others wrong at
No.
absolutely.
Heavens no.
Yeah, and that's where it leads us into some conflicts, because it's going to make others right, others wrong, and us right, no matter what.
Hmm.
And and so
Well, that's where
when you can,
that's who we perceive that we are.
yeah,
Yeah,
in a lot of
and we
cases.
defend and protect that, and every time that that is challenged is what we call stress.
Well, it really is the challenge becomes error in our perception. That's
Certainly, well,
the
certainly,
error.
yeah, absolutely, based upon our
And
experiences and limited capacities. Yeah.
so the biggest jobs we have as a human being is to try to leave that ego structure and ego mind, the conscious mind, which is connected to the body. That's the relationship the conscious mind and the body have together. So this is where you're creating illness and processing through disease and processing through uh, the pain and the suffering of the body, because the
Okay.
body mirrors the conscious mind.
Yeah. Do you distinguish your reference to a conscious mind? Do you distinguish that from the ego or from the hierophant that we create?
No,
It's the same, right? So
it's the
that
same
the
thing.
hierophant, the ego, the identity is our mind.
Right.
It's
All is mind.
what we're using right now in order to talk to each other.
Yes.
Yeah, but we have
Yeah.
in your yeah, you reference it, I think, as a subconscious mind. Uh, how do you make that association of the subconscious mind with that ego mind, with that hierophant mind?
Well, the subconscious mind is the memory banks for everything we've ever experienced throughout our soul's existence. And so the subconscious mind is the creator of 95% of your reality. The conscious mind creates 5%. And so when I talk about acquiescing to the subconscious mind, I'm talking about a brain that's a million times more powerful than your thinking mind.
Is it a brain?
Oh, yeah, it's a part of the back of your brain here, where the amygdala and the brain stem exist. That's the primary brain, and so that is extremely powerful. And
Does it
and
exist without your physicality?
yeah, I would say that it does. I mean, you're you're
So when the
you're
amygdala dies, when the or turns to dust, we'll say,
well, when your
what happens to that
brainstem
subconscious
goes,
mind?
well, your all is mind, no matter where you are in this dimension or any other dimension, and so that process stays intact, and the soul now understands what it accomplished in this physical lifetime, and so that's the important process, that we then have to go through an evaluation period once we ascend into our normal place. We're into that metaphysical position of being a soul. And so that has to be experienced and then evaluated on what we gained and what we lost in a lifetime.
Okay.
Edgar Cayce
And what
used to
is
say,
the measure of a gain or loss in your perspective?
well, Edgar Cayce used to say we've gained 2 steps in this one lifetime, or we've fallen back a step in a lifetime. So what the gain is we become more spiritually conscious, and
In our
that's
metaphysical self or in
in
our
a
physical self or
metaphysical
both?
self,
Okay.
and a spiritual alignment. And so I don't use spiritual as a religious context. That's not religion at all. There
Right.
is
I
no
understand.
dogma in the spiritual mind. And so
So,
the
what is
the dogma,
preserved after a lifetime?
your soul,
Yeah, but I mean,
your
what
your
aspect
soul
of
is energy.
our experiences that we have while we're running around here doing chores and that, and what is preserved out of our physical incarnation in your perspective?
What you've gained in awareness, what you've gained in perspective and perception, what you've gained in a greater understanding of that self realization process, that remains. And so, and where you may have fallen short and not gained in some of that perspective, well, that's the incubation for the next lifetime.
That is, you're. I'm trying to pull out of you your criteria for gain or loss.
Well, your gain is when you come to a clearer understanding of how your thinking has been in error.
Wouldn't you gain from having a perceived loss as well? Your metaphysical self, would that not gain from the perceived loss as well as the perceived
Well,
gain?
let's take it. Let's use it like this as an example. How about if you come into this lifetime and you've been a codependent in several lifetimes, and you remain a codependent in this lifetime? That's a loss. That's an opportunity that you had to become an individuated self, and you didn't go down that path.
And what have you? Uh, what is your failure of progression in that scenario?
Well, your failure of progression is you didn't individuate. You didn't
You
come into your
didn't
own
accept
sense of,
responsibility for your progression.
you didn't come into your own values to now individuate into what was important to your authentic you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would just be one metaphor, but it's one that I deal with all the time.
Okay.
What if you come in?
How do you describe the authentic you?
The authentic you is your soul self, your universal alignment. I call it universal consciousness. Some people call it God. Some you call it anything you want to call it. There's only one, and that only one is all there is. And so the closer you can work to become a part of that, then the better you are. You
Do you
know,
perceive that we're separate from that now?
we're, well, we are separate from that as in this human condition, but we're not separate from that when we work towards that enlightenment stage where we lose the separateness identity. I mean, I'm Marvin. That's my identity in this physical self. You're Dean. Well, when you get to a higher realm of universal consciousness, that identity disappears, and you live as, or um, you are in the energetic space of being a soul and energy that's more aligned with universal consciousness, which is
That
perfection.
is the path. That is the enlightenment path.
That is the enlightenment path.
Okay. What are we actually? My I know that we have nothing to gain. We only have things to get rid of, which is what we're describing by becoming more aware and surrendering these false perceptions. Um, what is the let me see how to phrase it. What is the tool that we, at this range of consciousness that we share, that we're employing in order to facilitate this progression? What is the inherent characteristic that pervades our range of experience in your understanding?
Well, one of them is feeling versus thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Your conscious mind is a liar. Your conscious mind doesn't need you. Your conscious mind is only about itself. It's looking to increase its own power over you. And so your thinking mind, Einstein said it best. I think 99 times and find nothing. I swim in silence and the truth comes to me. And so that pretty much clarifies what it is. Um, and so the next thing is we are all energy. We're not thinking. And the more you think, then the more you're coming from your conditioning and patterning of what you've been taught your thinking is, and what the thinking is, and the words you use, and the descriptions you use. And so all that has to be challenged as you individuate. You become your own person. You come into your own values of your authentic you. So your authentic you is a soul that is connected to your the higher self, the higher universal consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more that we can eliminate that separateness and walk inside of listening to our intuition, following our feelings versus thinking, understanding our emotions. The negative emotions are memories of our past. Positive emotions are love, joy, and happiness. But when we come into anxiety, these are all emotions out of the past being brought forward into the future, into the now, and running the anxiety of them occurring again. And so, and depression is about worrying about what maybe, might be, could be, should be. So we have all these things that the personal consciousness can bring up. And now that we're into the quantum physics time to understand life as a little more, we only perceive a very, very small part of reality. I mean, reality is 1/10,000th of a second. Well, you don't perceive that. You only use your physical senses to experience what the personal consciousness will accept as being valid and being safe. So, I mean, even in regressions, we can go into places that the subconscious mind will not bring forward things that the conscious mind can't handle. And so that's pretty clear.
In your work with hypnosis, and what is the difference between someone in we're sitting here talking, and someone who you have put into a hypnotic condition? What is the difference in those two conditions?
Well, because in hypnosis, you've relaxed the conscious mind to be out of the way. You've relaxed the body to be out of the way, because the subconscious mind doesn't have a way to analyze, it doesn't evaluate. It follows the conscious mind and what's needed to protect you. And so we look at it from one neurological point in the brain that's going to another neurological point through a neural pathway. And if that neural pathway is more in alignment with what's conflicting you, well, then when we get into the subconscious mind will always, always choose the easiest pathway or the better pathway for you. and then it will reconnect to another and associate with another part of the brain, which will then you will quit responding to an old pattern or conditioning that is conflicting you.
Okay, so how does that affect your? Is my understanding that the condition of the brain being part of the body is a manifestation of the mind. In other words, the mind is told the brain how to be a certain way, and when the mind tells the brain to be a different way, then the mind immediately conforms to its new instruction from the mind. And I understand the complexity of that because we're talking about multiple minds. We're talking about the ego mind as well as what commonly referred to as the deeper mind or the subconscious mind. In a hypnotic state where the ego mind, for sake of identification, is put on hold. Is that an accurate way to think of that? That the ego mind is for while the person is in the hypnotic state, that ego mind is just kind of put on hold for a little bit.
Well, I don't know if that it's put on hold as much as it subsides dominance.
Mm-hmm.
Because now when you relax that mind, the subconscious mind becomes more aware, more dominant.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can offer a different perspective and perception that is a lot easier for the individual mind or the conscious mind to then accept. And then that becomes a new response pattern. I mean, a lot of times I tell people, I don't want you to fall asleep because I want conscious buy in.
Mm-hmm.
When I present to you or present in a hypnotic state, present to the consciousness a suggestion, a better way to handle a conflict. Well, I want not only the subconscious mind to see, well, that's a lot easier. I want the conscious mind to accept the idea that there's another way of perception, another way of perceiving it. And then that way, that's how hypnosis or even NLP works.
Mm-hmm.
And that changes your beliefs, it changes your philosophy, which then allows you to live much more in the authentic self, individuated self, so that you can be a little more freer, a little less conflicted, and a little more joyful and happier, usually.
Mm-hmm. Well, the mind then, if I understand, uh, possibly reading between the lines, the mind is just a bundle of beliefs. Is that correct?
Well, the mind has beliefs, and beliefs are a construct of, um, as long as you have a belief and you're following your senses, well, they're hemming you in, they're boxing you in from all that is, and those beliefs are what you try to live within that context. So I teach people, don't even have a belief. How are you living in the moment and accepting reality be reality, which is a Lazu quote. Um,
Well, then
when
if you're
you've got
living
a
in the moment,
belief,
if you're living in the moment, you're being mindful and you're living in that what we're referencing as the deeper mind or the subconscious mind. But that's not realistic within our range of consciousness. It is in our future. But even that is a bundle of beliefs, but of a much less significant conflicted perception, is it not?
well, a belief is more or less a conscious concept. There are no conscious concepts when you're living in the moment.
Is it not also a metaphysical concept? The
Whatever way
constraints,
you want to,
constr-
what
yeah.
however you want to term it. When you're in the moment, you're in the moment. There is no belief. There is no evaluation.
Okay. We'll have to disagree on that one. Agree to disagree on that one. There are multiple ranges of consciousness, and ideally our perception would be that we exist on all those ranges of consciousness simultaneously, but we are restricted from a large portion of those because of our um, limited beliefs. And that's by design, that's intentional, in order to allow us the opportunity to fulfill our purpose at each of those ranges of consciousness as we evolve through the ranges of consciousness. How does the hypnotic state differ from a meditative state in your perspective?
How does it differ from a metaphysical state?
No, a meditative state.
Well, in meditation, you can, if you've been a good meditator and a good practicer of meditation, well, then you can reach a higher level of consciousness, and you can subside. You can move away from the ego, and you start getting a sense and a feeling and an intuitive understanding. You start seeing things as energy instead of thinking. So meditation can take you into a greater sense of mind. Now, hypnosis, I can take you way, way, way further than meditation can take you, unless you are a professional meditator, because I can relax the body and the conscious mind to the point to where you lose the idea of time and space, and you're in that higher consciousness. And the higher consciousness, you can get to quantum healing, and quantum healing is where you lose your sense of identity. And when you lose the sense of identity, you're in universal consciousness, which is perfection. And you can heal diseases, you can heal whatever is in error and whatever is conflicted in this body.
Yes. Yeah, but as a general rule, that's designed to be beyond our capacity in this range of consciousness.
Well, in a conscious, it is out of our range of capacity. In the subconscious, it's never out of range. You're always in contact with the universal consciousness.
And
Always,
but
always,
there's nothing to
always.
heal there.
What you're healing is you're going into that part of your mind. And when you're in that part of the mind, you heal whatever conflict that has been brought on by the conscious mind and the experiences that are in error.
In your regression work, how um, how does our past life experiences, what we learn from an incarnation, and please correct me where your understanding may differ from this. Um, our past life experiences accrue to our, as you call it, the soul, and I just call it the metaphysical self. Are we in agreement on? Are we copacetic on that? That what we perceive to be our past life experiences accrues and is retained in our metaphysical self.
Well, yeah, I understand, you're saying metaphysical self, or I call it a spiritual self, or the
You're
high
calling it
self.
soul. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm calling it a soul.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
The soul is forever.
Right.
If you
It's
call
it's,
your
it's our enduring
metaphysical
self.
self your forever self, and it's the same thing.
Right. Okay. The and I'm not sure I understand what is accrued to that metaphysical self in your perspective from a lifetime. What is preserved from a lifetime? And we had talked a little bit about advancing and regressing and so forth, but
Well, when you go into a regression, it's going to the subconscious will go through what is in conflict in your current life, and so that you can see where the foundation of an error or perspective perception started and occurred.
does
And
it go through the
so,
story or does it go through the emotion?
oh sure, it goes through the story, the emotion, goes through the whole process. And then, when I mean, I've had people through regression, you take them into the last day of the life, and then when they pass, you have them describe that passing and how they're feeling about the life they just lived. And then usually, typically, it will come with a little bit of ego involved in how
Mm-hmm.
they see it. Now, when I take them into the light, which is into a much higher perspective, well, that brings it into a whole new way of looking at it, that then clarifies what that life was for and about and what you learned from it. And so that can be very supportive of some of the conflicts that you're facing in this life. And regression is always, always going to connect to something that you're experiencing in this life that you don't have an understanding of, uh, or a correct understanding, um, so that you now can perceive it in a whole different way. And so, we use, as hypnotists, we use a lot of this life in age regression, which takes you back to before the age of 7, where 95% of all your conflicts were programmed. Well, when you go back and see where something was programmed at that age, we call that the initial sensitizing event. And then you can follow that through subsequent events in your life. And you have a dialogue between the adult self, mature self, and the inner child self. And the inner child is comforted by the knowledge of the adult self and can now go through an event that was very conflicting and go through it in a much safer, more comfortable way, so that you now change a perspective about it as the adult self, and quit responding in that way that is causing conflict or causing you to do things over and over and over that are not in your best interest.
Mm-hmm. I explain that as simply emotional baggage. It's an accumulation of life experiences that you didn't learn at the time that you had the experience, and we get to keep that in the form of emotion. And when you resolve the emotion, then the resolution of the story becomes pretty um, almost immediate, because the emotion is the significance of it is put into perspective. Yeah. Okay. Um, the astrology work that you do uh, has obviously been a large part of your understanding, and understand that you have also you said you did a decade of um, uh, study of Native American shamanism. Is that accurate? Or
Well, I wouldn't just call it shamanism. It was just a Native American understanding of the spiritual connection that they used throughout their lives.
yeah, okay. how has that shaped your the work that you do, and how did that aid your advancement in your journey?
Well, I studied a lot about the Native American medicine wheel,
Mm-hmm.
which is cycles and phases, which is all of life. All of life is a cycle, and it goes through phases through that cycle. And the Native Americans were heavily spiritual people. When you're talking about shamanism, you're talking about somebody that can actually arrive at that very high level of consciousness and oneness with a universal consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how, when you get to that place, there is no time and space. So now you can evaluate a person's past, present, and future, and in so doing, you can help somebody heal in the present what has been brought in from the past. And so, just that deepened my spiritual understanding, um, of that decade of study. So it's one thing to say, for education, to talk like he talked, because he was very Christian. He read the Bible every year of his life. Now, when so when you understand different levels or elements of this spiritual journey, well, then you have to start responding much more on a spiritual basis than responding on a conditioned society, cultural basis, or on the belief systems that you were led to believe that this is all the truth and is all there is. I'll go back to our belief talk. James Hillman was a very noted psychologist of the last 100 years, and he said, to be sane, we must recognize our beliefs as fictions. And so this aligns up with Walter Russell as well. So when you don't have a belief, and when you ascend this lifetime, there are no beliefs. You're in alignment with universe. And when you're in alignment with universe, you're in the place of all knowledge, all knowledge. So you don't need a belief. You don't need to have the knowledge that you've gained from this lifetime. So when you can ascend to that higher perspective, well, then you can become more spiritual, live more spiritual, walk the talk of being more spiritual. And then you can bypass some of the conflicts of hate and anger and frustrations and all of that, to realize that your guidance is always perfect.
Rightly so, and I think maybe that's a good point to leave with our audience, and hopefully they can assume that responsibility that we've been alluding to throughout our conversation, and undertake the exploration themselves. Our conversations like this hopefully provide them with some resources, but that notwithstanding, they still have to undertake that task of assuming responsibility for their healing. One question I would like to leave on: what is, all that we've been talking about with the methodologies that you've learned and the practices that you've learned, um, are all directed under the heading of healing. What is your what are we healing? What is our perception? What is your perception of healing?
Well, healing is where you have lived a multitude of lifetimes, where you've had error in your thinking, your beliefs, um, and this is conflicted on the body. And whether it's in the DNA or the family heritage, epigenetics, it's a process of how do we heal the emotional pain and suffering that we've gone through and that we've inherited. And so you're always in a healing mode uh, as you learn to be more metaphysical, more of the enlightenment that we seek in self-realization. Ye are all gods, and what I've done, you shall do, and greater things I have done, you shall do. So we've been told in a multitude of enlightened beings that same thing. If we are the co-creator of our life, well then look what you're creating. And if you take responsibility for everything in your life that you create, well now you're learning, you're growing, you're evolving, and you're coming one step closer to being self-realized of who you truly really are.
Well said. Thank you, sir.
You're
Marvin,
welcome.
it's been a pleasure. I've delighted in our conversation, and I hope that you found it um, uh, comfortable as well. I think you are providing our listeners with some strategic information to hopefully help their understanding and expand their perceptions of self and capacity to function within this range of consciousness that we all share. Uh,
Well,
Go ahead. I was just going to
I,
ask if you had
I
anything
just
else to say.
I think of it like gardening. People come to me, and I've done a lot of studies, and I've had a lot of years to do all of that. And I realize sometimes you're talking over the heads of people, but I look at it as if I plant a seed that helps you grow, and you grow that seed into a full grown plant, well, then I've done what spirits asked me to do, and that's plant seeds. So I just plant seeds.
Very good. And before we started talking, you were talking about how much water you got in your hometown, and water is necessary in order to make seeds grow.
This is very true.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Marvin. Please have a wonderful day. Take care of yourself. And hold on. I'm going to stop our recording. We can chat for a few minutes
All right.
after
Thank you,
this.
Dean. I
And
appreciate
I
you
do
having
have
me.
a habit of hitting the wrong button and cutting us off, and that's not my intent. So